The morning was gray and cold. A thin mist lay low over the road, winding between the lamps and the passing cars. The headlights moved slowly, without rush, their glow trembling faintly as if uncertain whether to cut through the fog or surrender to it. Everything seemed muted, half asleep. Inside the car, there was silence. Alexander held his daughter close against him. She slept in his arms, her cheek resting softly against his chest. The warmth of her small body was barely perceptible, but to him it was everything. Each shallow breath she took carried with it a slight effort, a reminder of how fragile she was. From time to time, she coughed lightly in her sleep, a sound so small yet so piercing that his heart clenched with every note. He stroked her back slowly, gently, as though afraid his touch might disturb her. His fingers brushed her hair, soft strands with a faint scent of vanilla, a fragrance that belonged only to her. Her thin fingers clutched his jacket unconsciously, holding on even in her sleep. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, and in that instant, memory washed over him. He remembered another weight in his arms, not of a child, but of a woman. His wife, Olga. 2 years had passed since she left him, carried away by a cruel illness that came swiftly and struck mercilessly. He had been powerless to stop it, powerless to save her. That sense of helplessness still haunted him. Since then, only his daughter remained Eva, his light and his greatest fear. She was all that was left, and, because she was so often ill, so fragile, he lived in constant terror of losing her too. The thought of enduring that kind of loss a second time felt unbearable. The hospital finally came into view around the bend, a modern building of glass and white stone, gleaming faintly even in the dull light of the morning. It was said to house one of the best pulmonary departments in the region. Here, he hoped, lay a chance, a miracle, perhaps. He parked the car and stepped out, the chill air biting against his skin. Eva stirred, opening her sleepy eyes, rubbing them with her small fists. "Are we there?" she whispered, her voice hoarse but tender. He smiled faintly, kissing her forehead. "Yes, sunshine. Almost there." Gathering her into his arms once more, he walked steadily toward the entrance. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss, and warm, sterile air enveloped them. A nurse at the reception desk looked up, her expression gentle. She rose, smiled, and took their documents. "They're expecting you," she said kindly. "Please, go right in." Alexander nodded, his throat too tight for words. He followed the corridor, white walls, a soft glow from overhead lamps, the faint chemical scent of antiseptic, and the hushed atmosphere of a place where suffering was both acknowledged and fought against. Eva pressed herself closer to him, trembling slightly, though she said nothing. Then a door ahead opened. And in that instant, time seemed to fracture. Standing there was a woman in a white coat, her hair neatly tied back. But her eyes, those eyes, were unmistakable. Light, familiar, filled with the sadness he had once known intimately. Irina. The name echoed silently in his mind. She was his past. His pain. The woman who had left him abruptly years ago, when life had already begun to unravel. Her lips parted. "Sasha." Her voice trembled as she spoke his name, barely a whisper. He froze, staring. Words failed him. He hadn't expected this. Not here, not now, when his heart was already stretched thin with worry for his daughter. Irina's gaze dropped to the child in his arms. Recognition dawned quickly, deeply. "Is this your daughter?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Eva. She's 5. What's wrong with her?" He swallowed, his voice rough. "Breathing problems." Irina approached slowly, her movements calm, steady, professional yet touched with something more personal, something she couldn't conceal. "May I?" she asked, addressing the girl gently. Eva nodded timidly, extending a small hand. Irina placed her stethoscope carefully against the child's chest, listening intently. She did not rush. Her expression was one of deep concentration. Brows knit, lips pressed together in thought. Alexander watched, his pulse racing. Memories and questions swirled, but he held them back, waiting. At last, Irina lowered the stethoscope and removed her gloves. "She needs a CT scan and blood tests," she said firmly. "I'll arrange everything right away." Her eyes lifted to his. "You'll stay with her, Sasha?" Again, he only nodded. His voice would not come. Too many emotions clashed within him, anger, longing, confusion, fear. Years of silence pressed heavily between them. But at this moment, only his daughter mattered. The days that followed blurred into one another. The hospital had its own rhythm, shifts of nurses changing, the steady dripping of IVs, the muffled footsteps along sterile corridors. For Alexander, time felt suspended. He remained always at Eva's side, never leaving, as though his presence alone could shield her. Gradually, she began to improve. Her cough grew lighter, her smiles more frequent. She drew pictures, flowers, sunshine, sometimes her mother, sometimes a tall woman with kind eyes. She often looked toward Irina, who spent long hours checking her IVs, adjusting monitors, measuring her pulse. But beyond her medical duties, she talked to Eva gently, patiently, with genuine warmth. Alexander noticed. He saw the way his daughter brightened when Irina entered the room, the way fear seemed to ease in her presence. He also noticed the change in Irina herself, the softness in her eyes, the steadiness in her hands, the tenderness in her every gesture. Against his will, he began to trust again. One quiet evening, when the ward had settled into hushed stillness, Alexander slipped into the corridor. He sat on a bench near the window, staring out at the city lights blurred by the glass. Irina appeared, carrying 2 cups of tea. Without a word, she offered him one and sat beside him. For a while, they said nothing. The sound of a distant Ford drip marked the silence. Finally, his voice came low, almost breaking. "Will she recover?" Irina nodded slowly. "Her lungs are weak, congenitally so. But now she'll have proper treatment. She has every chance to live a good life. We'll manage this, Sasha. Together." The word struck him, together. He lifted his gaze to her. "Why did you leave back then?" She stilled, her hands tightening around her cup. After a long breath, she answered, "I couldn't cope. You were distant, always consumed by work, by meetings, by contracts. I felt invisible, alone. And I was afraid. So I chose to go." Her voice wavered, but her eyes remained steady. "Forgiveness is difficult. I know." He remembered it all too clearly. The endless late nights, the weight of responsibilities, the looming shadow of Olga's illness. And Irina, caught in a storm she hadn't known how to weather. "You're different now," he said quietly. She met his gaze, unflinching. "Because I've lost much. And I don't want to keep losing. I want to make things right." No more words were needed. The silence between them no longer cut, it spoke. And for the first time in years, it spoke of possibility, not despair. The next morning, sunlight poured into the hospital courtyard. Eva, laughing, chased soap bubbles that floated on the breeze. A nurse had allowed them onto the terrace for fresh air. Alexander sat watching her, his heart swelling at the sound of her laughter. It had been too long since he had heard it ring so freely. Irina joined him, sitting lightly at his side. "She's strong," she said softly. "Like her father. Like her mother too." He turned to her, warmth rising in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt the fear recede. He realized he was not alone, not anymore. Irina reached for his hand. Her touch was light, tentative, but within it lay a promise. He closed his fingers around hers, holding on. Ahead of them, Eva ran barefoot across the terrace, chasing the glimmers of sunlight caught in the bubbles. Behind her, the spring wind stirred, gentle, alive, like a heartbeat. Alexander watched them both, his daughter, his hope, and the woman beside him who had returned not for him, but for the child. And maybe, just maybe, for him as well. Life, he realized, was coming back, not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly, tenderly, with the certainty of dawn after a long night. And this time, he intended to hold on to it.